in that process, I have uncovered some things that are uncomfortable, but fascinating and and they're important to discuss.
Kids aren't connecting with it. I would love to change that.
So, welcome everybody to an episode of TAOL Global, podcast of TAOL Project. My name is Gabo, and today we're going to discover a little bit of the importance of knowing our past. Our past actually explains a lot of what we are experiencing today, brings a lot of context, and it's very important for us not to make the same mistakes over and over. Sadly, I think we do make mistakes over and over,
Yeah.
but hopefully we can learn a little bit today with two fantastic guests that we have today. Today we have Anne Grace Evans. She works in living history and history education. And what she most wants is make the subject matter more accessible and exciting through technology and different mediums. That's very interesting. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
We also have Kathryn Creech. She's a freelance writer from Apex, North Carolina.
Yep.
And you're currently publishing on Substack, right?
Yep, you can find me on Substack, Kathryn Creech.
Awesome. And your writing and photography has already been featured in the Kingston Free Press, New Bern Sun Journal, and other publications.
Yes, I wrote for the newspaper for a little while.
Awesome. I'm very excited. This is a conversation I was really looking forward to have here because we were talking for a little bit in a meetup that we're going to talk potentially in a little bit. But first of all, let's start with you. And Grace, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, so I went to school for, ancient history, but I've always loved all history, and I couldn't imagine working in anything but history because I just love it so much, and I feel like you said, everybody needs a deeper grounding in it. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And so that's really a passion of mine, is to kind of share the past with everyone. And the way that you experience history in school as a student isn't exactly the best way. Most kids aren't connecting with it. And I would love to change that. That's really what I most want to do.
A change. I think we need a change, potentially in the full education system. But we can talk about that later. So, Kathryn Creech, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, what motivates you to chase history in this passionate way?
Well, I feel like I've got this in the wrong place now because I'm not facing you. How about that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, hi, I'm from Apex. I grew up there. I have a Polish and Eastern North Carolina background, family-wise. And I've been really focused on researching my ancestors for the last 2 years. And in that process, I have uncovered some things that are uncomfortable, but fascinating and they're important to discuss. Particularly things, topics around race, but also family structure and just the way the family dynamic has changed over the last, of course, 100 years. It's changed a lot. And so that's just kind of what I've been digging into, is just like, what did people's lives used to look like? What did my ancestors' lives used to look like? And how does that compare to what we're going through today?
I think that's a very important point that you touched on, uncomfortable. I don't know if for us to make a change, as you said, we actually need to go to for a period of uncomfortable feelings. Maybe like really knowing about ourselves isn't that comfortable. Like what I have always thought is if someone wants to really understand who they are, they gotta focus on both sides. Like the positive aspects, but also the negative aspects, right? Because I think understanding that negative or what has the potential to make us feel uncomfortable has more benefits in the long future.
Yeah,
can you
I've been recently really deep diving into this topic of difficult subjects and like facing them, because if you just push them away or try to act like if you just try to get over it, right? Instead of really cradling these behaviors or these actions that like really weren't that cool. It really wasn't nice of my ancestors to do certain things. It was really amazing for my ancestors to do other things. And we can look at that from a distance, but we can also look at that right in our own faces. What are we doing? What are our behaviors that could improve? That, can we be honest with ourselves and our peers and make the changes that really need to be made?
Mm-hmm.
Also, it's kind of like you have to really delve into the ugly and understand, because some of what we're talking about, it's like that didn't happen that long ago. And it's the
Right.
people who did that they're not like radically different species than us. They are very much, their brains and their psychology operated in the same way that ours did. So it's you really have to understand and come face to face and be kind of horrified with what it was to really never repeat that behavior, make sure it never happens again.
And to give it its full credit, because these people have gone through real events, real tragedies, real suffering. And if we can't take a minute and highlight that and say, hey, we know this happened, there's literal fact, and we're sorry, that was not fair, that was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Part of the premise of this podcast, this project, is actually to make people behave in a coherent way. According to what they really believe. Like what are our motivations in life? What are our aspirations? What's the best way to behave as humans, right? But not only intellectualize that, but also applying that, behaving. Actioning what we really think, and I really believe that what you're exploring and like digging a little deeper into what the background of our culture, our history is, I think we have to take that into consideration if we want to make progress as humanity.
Yeah, we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be honest with our kids and our grandkids, because what was the suffering for if we can't honestly learn from it?
Yeah. I want to talk about like those changes that you and you were talking about. What do you think are the problems on how history is being taught nowadays?
Well, part of it is if you're like in an AP course or something, you're teaching to a test. So it's like you only have this amount of time. And there's a certain amount we have to cover, dates, facts, that sort of thing. And so it kind of ends up being really bland of like, okay, this date, this fact, this law, this person was president, that sort of thing. And it's just like a rote memorization type of experience, and you don't really end up getting a sense of what life was like. History done well should be kind of like time travel. I feel like it should transport you to that place, and you can see yourself there, and you can see what a day in the life was like, what these people, what their hopes and dreams and fears were. and basically connect on that level of we're the same, just with different technology, basically.
So for you, like an immersive experience
Yes,
would be the
I'm
best
all
way.
about you should be able to like feel like you're living it.
You know, when I was in high school, I had a. First of all, I have to clarify that I wasn't the best student in history in particular, because I don't memorize things. I have a background in mathematics, so for me, like building the logical path to the answer is like how my brain operates, or how it feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
But I had a teacher. His name was Napoleon. He was really old, and to be honest, I mean, he passed a few years ago. He was great, even though he maybe was there in the classroom maybe 5 times during the entire semester. His class was great because he made history appealing for everybody, even for me. That at the time I wasn't like interested on the subject. Later on, I mean, I developed that feeling of appreciation for history, and not only appreciation, the importance and the need of understanding. But back then, my it was like your grandfather was telling you a story,
Yeah.
you know, and it made it very, very appealing, and it was fantastic. I had, I think nowadays, imagination as much as we used to in the past. But then during the class, everybody was like traveling to a different world. You know, it wasn't the classroom. It suddenly transformed into what he was telling. And I think just a few people have that gift of communicating in that way to like bring to the present, or to your thought process, like every single aspect of the point in history that they are referring to.
Exactly. And also, I like what you were saying about math or science, of like there's a process and you should be able to like use logic to arrive at a conclusion. I feel like history should be taught more like that, sort of
Immersive.
yeah, investigating of like, well, why would these people do this or think that, and what they probably, where would they go next, and that sort of thing, not just like a fact and a date, basically.
What do you think are like? Okay, let me give some background or context, but I really feel that history is written by people who have the power to actually write history or make it more broadly available. So what we may read in a book may not be the full scope or the full story of what actually happened. Do you think there is some type of bias in the education system that is, yeah? So I saw that expression right
yeah.
away.
It's so intense. It's so intense. It's like suffocating, the way that we are told to interpret history. And especially our generation, I feel like nowadays people are more woke. And so like they're trying to understand. But when our textbooks had Caucasian Egyptians building, you know, they didn't have truthful imagery. They turned everything into a softer whitewashed. Yes, they whitewashed our history in a way that kind of blinded us to the reality of our ancestors. And I think that both of us just love diving into that and really analyzing little bits of our culture and how we arrived there and what it really looked like, you know, by going back and finding primary sources and things like that. We're not looking at our textbooks from the early 2000s. we're going for primary sources at there's a couple of places that we really like to regular. The state archives.
The state archives, for sure.
If you could I wish they would put campouts, like overnight campouts there, because you get started on a project and you don't want to leave. Like you find the text that you've been looking for, and of course you can't take it with you. So like you're either stuck taking pictures or like page after page so that you can read it at home, or just coming back to visit with your text when you can. Yeah, we love the state archives. Also, what is the online resource that you use?
Well,
it's like, so you were showing it to me the other day. It's about it's some kind of database where they're trying.
I was using the UK archives recently for something I was researching, but the problem is if you go back a certain amount, it's not digitized. So unfortunately, it's all in London. But yes, for digitization, definitely.
So, yeah, so much is available now that wasn't even 5 years ago.
Yeah. I would say about the way we are taught the past and the way the past has been written about is, I mean, history is written by the victors. That's definitely true. But some of it is just unintentionally wrong, or just oversimplified. So the past is, I was reading something about the 90s. Somebody wrote, I can't remember his name, but it's a great book, and it's just called The 90s. And the foreword he writes is, well, obviously, I can't write a book about everyone's experience of the 90s because it would all just be stereotypes. You don't really realize you're going through a specific epic or time period that people are going to look back on in a certain way while you're going through it.
You don't know what people want recorded and what people want documented.
What people want documented, and everybody's experience is a little bit different. A lot of people love a certain trend or they think a certain way about things, but that's not going to be everyone's experience. Also, if you're going back to history where the records are less good, so Middle Ages, basically, and there's just really one source for everything, it's... well, you're putting a lot of faith in that one source. So I think that is a huge problem in history, is that people don't interrogate what we know as much. They think it's like written in stone. That's fact.
Yeah, they think it's fact because
But it's like science. History does change. We find new things out, and it changes it completely changes everything we thought, whether that's an archaeological discovery or that is some document that's been hidden away in an archive or a monastery somewhere. So I think oversimplification is the problem, in saying, oh, everybody thought this way, everybody did this, is just for ease of learning, and I think that's the biggest problem, maybe.
Even when we look at today, everyone has their own experience. I mean, people of privilege have a much different experience than those that are disadvantaged. And who is going to be more able to document their account? The privileged person. And so a lot gets left by the wayside because the privileged people, the well-educated people, the people who are actually documenting history aren't experiencing the reality of the real person.
There's no way that one person can have everyone's experience or see everyone's experience. So if you only have a limited amount of sources, there's a lot you're not getting.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most important things we want to highlight in our research and our documentation, is just that there's an all-encompassing picture that, like, we will never be able to wrap our hands around completely. Like, we have a little bit here and a little bit of information here, but we don't know the truth. And we can't fight with each other like we do.
That's right. Yeah, I think you would know about this, but I know there are a couple of books talking about World War II, for example, World War I, from the eyes of people who didn't win.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
From the countries that, like they lost a lot. Is your project something similar? Like you're trying to portray history from the lenses of the other side or different angles?
So, where we started out is, I think, because we were like so interested in everything, and she was saying at one point we were talking about, I can't remember what we were talking about, but she was saying like, oh, I have trouble seeing like how this timeline fits in with other timelines. And
I love history, but it's very difficult to conceptualize
linearly
the points, and get it in the right, because I know all of the points, but they're just
how do they
floating around.
connect?
I need to tack them to something, and like I've always wanted a big timeline, like in my living room or something, of just world history. So at any moment, I could just go up to it and be like, "Oh yes, that is what happened in 1200 AD." Okay.
So I had this.
I knew it.
So I had this idea. I'm like, okay, so like think about like the Tudors, because like that's a good touchstone. People, like, if you say the Tudors, people can call something to mind. It's because they've been so documented. And I'm like, that would be a great idea if you started there with the Tudors and then you branched off how they connect to different cultural movements and time periods and different things. So we decided we started recording with like the Tudors, and the idea is to like branch off from there and be like, oh, here's how that thing you were thinking of or that thing you were studying, here's where it fits into the larger context. And at the center you have that touchstone of like, oh, everybody can picture that in their mind, sort of.
That's very interesting. And so what I'm thinking is, first of all, I think that sounds like a great idea. But have you ever had a situation where you get into like an argument with someone else? Because as you said, like when we read books, we a lot of times take that as facts, right? And we take it for like this is the thing, this is the real thing. And then if we face someone with a different point of view, it's kind of attempting against our intellect, and then that part of the ego comes out, and then you start fighting, and then like sometimes could be hard to agree on something. But I think the important point here is like let's calm down, like these are the facts. We have a disagreement, yes, but let's look at the historical context. What else happened here? But have you find that scenario where you are discussing something with someone else, and maybe they have different facts, and everyone is fighting, like, no, like I'm right, and the other person is like, no, you're wrong, I am right. Have you had that?
Well, working at a historic site, yes. I have. I think the problem is the answer is that I'm going to give is an unsatisfying one, because we like things to be black and white,
right?
Like pigeonholed, like we want a definite answer. And I'm like, well, history is the study of people, and people are at their core contradictory. So one thing can be true while another thing can also be true. And that's very uncomfortable for people to hold those two things in their head. And I'm like, well, you have to, because that's how people work. So that's how history works.
I've noticed that older people in my interactions trying to learn the honest history of, well, for me, I focus on Eastern North Carolina, and a lot of these people will just shut down. If you present an idea that differs from what they're comfortable with or what they have been taught, they will just not offer any more information to you. They don't want a different interpretation. They don't want to know the rest of the facts. I don't know why. Maybe they're afraid. But again, it's this whole situation where like, how are we going to learn unless we really hold these things and look at them closely? And the behaviors and the situations, the specifics of each era. And that fascinates me. It terrifies other people.
I think it's hard. And I feel that I can see why, because you build an identity based on what you know about yourself. So if someone comes to you and they are like, no, like, you know, like this is not what happened. Let's put an example. Let's say that, you know, like I've known my parents since I was born, but I just have consciousness of them maybe after I was 3 or 4 years old. Before that, like I will trust whatever they tell me. But if someone comes to me and they are like, you know, they are not your real parents, you were adopted.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, what? Why? And then I'm going to be like in a crisis mode, you know, like trying to understand
they're
what's
not
my real
who you
history.
think they are.
Exactly.
People don't like that. It's uncomfortable. Again, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But those uncomfortable moments, those are like, that's the richness in life. That's your opportunity to grow. That's your opportunity to make a difference.
And I also think that's another reason why history is not very interesting to, like, if you're learning it in school, because a lot of people in my life have been like, well, I hated history in school, but like now that I'm older and learning about things, like I realize it's like a whole different thing than what I thought it was. It's because that if you're taught that these people are like two-dimensional cardboard cutouts, and that it's like a fairy tale, and like, and then this thing happened and then they all lived happily ever after, it's like, well, that's boring and not true. And that's essentially what we've been taught a little bit. Yeah, that
The
would
whitewash, simplified version.
Yeah, the simplified
Just because
version.
that's what fits into the curriculum. You know,
Yeah.
they can't do what we do. They wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah, the simplified version is like, I could see how that is boring. I don't blame anybody for being like, oh, I just really am not interested in that. It's the interest, like diving deep and being like, there are so many things we just don't know and we need to know better. That's why we keep investigating and reading and learning. And it's like true crime with history is sometimes how I feel like, oh, I gotta get an answer to this question. And going to the archives and being like, can I figure out exactly what they were thinking or who came up with that idea or things like that.
Which, can I give a shout out to the people that work at the state archives?
Yeah.
Because they are amazing human beings. They're so patient. They're so knowledgeable. And you can go there with just a little crumb of a question, and they can open up a whole new world for you.
And be like, oh, I know where the thing you're looking for is.
It's really fun. Yeah. It's really fun. So for anybody that considers themselves an academic,
or even not, if you're just a curious person.
If you're a curious person, go on an adventure to the archives, because it's a good time.
I think it's really cool to talk to people in any historical site. We went recently to Dinosaur Park, Utah, that area.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And it was
Where
really
is it?
Cool. I think it's Utah. I think it's in the state of Utah.
Oh, wow. This is a real trip. Okay.
Yeah. It was a really fun trip because we crossed like different states. That was my first time in Colorado. It was beautiful. That wasn't my first time there, and it was just amazing. But the point is that we were at the dinosaur park looking at all the, like the dinosaur bones. And we were talking to a ranger. Her name was Molly. I even left a Google review for her because I thought it was great, because we just came to her with a simple question and we spent like an hour talking to her. And you can see the passion that some of them have for their job, and I think that's fantastic. Because we ended up learning a lot, and I really have appreciation for this kind of people. And I wanted to check if we can talk about some of the uncomfortable facts that we've learned recently.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
For example, I want to start with sharing one. I'm originally from Mexico City. And recently, with this administration has been very interesting, and I think it's going to be very interesting for the next 3.5 years, or even more. But there was a thing with renaming the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh yeah.
And everybody was like very offended. Like everybody in Mexico was like very nationalist, you know. And then I was like, but where is this coming from? I don't think he's joking just because he's saying something. And then I started tracing back some stuff, and I'm sure I'm still missing a lot about this history, but it comes from it's related. It's not the trigger, but it's related to one of the CIA and DEA involvements. You know, like they don't really get along. They really bump. And I don't know if you heard of this guy. His name was Enrique Camarena. He was a DEA agent. He was infiltrated in Mexico. And the official story is that he was killed by one of the capos, the cartel leaders. But it turns out that it was actually an order from the CIA intelligence, mostly because the DIA was fighting against drugs. But the CIA was fighting against like ideology. They were fighting against communism, 70s, 80s, 60s. And it was very interesting. So the real thing with the Gulf of Mexico comes back to how they want to extract oil from the Gulf. And there was an island there that was part of Mexico that was destroyed by the Mexican government.
Within the Gulf of Mexico,
yes.
There was an island, and the Mexican government destroyed?
Yeah.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Yep.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so basically what happened is that I'm not cheering for the government in Mexico or any government in particular, because I don't feel that if that island wasn't destroyed, Mexico would be better. The point is that, you know, international water starts after some distance from land. So that island was still counting as part of Mexico. So Mexico's ownership over the Gulf was extended a little bit beyond what we know nowadays because of the island. There was an agreement, CIA, the government of Mexico. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of corruption in Latin America, you want to say. It's a fact. It's a fact that there's a lot of corruption. So what happened was that the government agreed to destroy that island. I'm going to check if I can get the name. And it wasn't that long ago. I was maybe 7, 8 years old when that happened. So because of that, basically, Mexico lost part of the ownership of the Gulf.
Yeah.
And nowadays, the U.S. wants to claim it for drilling, for oil. There's a lot behind, and the reason of why I was bringing this agent from the DEA, it's because part of this agreement between Mexico and the U.S. about the tariffs and the Gulf of Mexico renaming it was because the U.S. wanted this drug leader to be sent to the U.S. That was kind of the agreement. We're going to stop the tariffs. We're going to think about renaming the Gulf if you send us this person. Again, this person...
To face charges.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So extraditing from Mexico to the United States to face charges. Drug charges?
Yes.
Federal drug charges.
Federal, exactly. So it's like a big thing, you know? And Mexico complied with it. They sent this guy. But then that's how you realize that what you see on TV, it goes like beyond what you can actually see, you know, what you can actually get from the news.
Because declassifying things and...
Yeah, that's why I'm all for like declassifying a lot of documents, you know? But again, I think I don't know if we are ready to uncover everything. I think we need to be in a very specific mindset to be ready to receive those messages and be
Well,
uncomfortable with it.
it's also important that you are the right person to tell the story, because there are definitely stories that I have come across and really felt passionate about presenting them, but then stepped back because it's not my place. It's not my place to dive into that. And I'm hoping at some point we will be able to approach more difficult topics, maybe with a featured guest, like an expert in one of the topics that I'm personally really interested in is Reconstruction, the era of Reconstruction, which is this short period of time after the Civil War. And it's not terribly well documented, and that is entirely on purpose. And if I can tell the story of what Black people went through during that decade, but I would rather have a person of color tell that story. I would feel more comfortable with a person of color telling the story because they know where their culture, where their race is today.
I agree. So it makes more sense from someone who has experienced the consequences of that historical fact to be the voice for that part of history.
And I'm thrilled to prompt the conversation or ask the questions, but I don't have the full scope. I don't. As a white female American, I can't grasp a lot of suffering. And that sounds really arrogant, and I'm sorry, but it's true. It's true. What the hell do I know about suffering?
Mm-hmm. Do you think, and I'm going to share a very personal point of view. People from Mexico, we've been subject to, well, we have a different history. Our ties with Spain are very unique. And a few years back, the former president of Mexico, he asked the government from Spain to extend a public apology for what happened when Spain conquered Mexico. I thought, like, this is stupid. Like, we understand that part of history, but at the same time, if we want to evolve, we really need to get rid of that feeling of we are the victims. That's part of our history. That's true. We may have faced more challenges because we were conquered by a different country. That's true. But that's for our own understanding. Like, that happened back then.
Don't get me wrong. I have beef with Cortez, okay? But at a certain point, people like to look at things like everything happens for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that Spain conquered Mexico for a reason. I mean, like, that there's good logic in that, but it is so much of Mexican culture is Spanish. I mean, just the religious element alone, that engulfs in my opinion. I spent time in Mexico. I'm definitely not from there, but when I was there, I was living with a Mexican family, and the women in the family spent at least 3 days a week in church. It was just consistently, it was what their free time consisted of. It was what they did. They were very, very religious. And to think back that before the Spaniards came, that wasn't even there is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think part of that is we tend to assume that if something in history didn't happen, we would be better nowadays. And I don't think that's true. Like,
Just different, yeah.
exactly, just different. I was actually having a discussion with ChatGPT earlier today, and I was like, assume that there are no genetical modifications and we are kind of look alike. What would history look like? and and ChatGPT was like, well, like you wouldn't have like a lot of bad things that happen in history, but you will still have a fight for power, a fight for social classes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very, very interesting.
They would just find something else to like discriminate against, some way to differentiate between people and like be like, oh, we're better because of this reason.
Yeah.
It's that's another interesting thing of like the way that history ended up shaken out is I feel like some people get very reactionary about like, well, should people of European descent or white people be ashamed of like all the things that happened? And well, it's not, they didn't become oppressors because of any inherent qualities of being European, being white. It just is, it happened that way because they realized, oh, we have this kind of advantage. Let's make the most of it to take the stuff from other people. And it's, if...
Are you referring to guns?
The
and
guns,
horses?
germs, and guns, germs, and steel. Yeah, and that is one theory. That's the Jared Diamond. He's a famous historian. That's the Jared Diamond theory. But yes, sort of like that. Of some people have an advantage, and they realize we can use this to take stuff from other people. If the other people had realized, oh, maybe I could use this advantage to take advantage of these people, if they had somehow done that first, history would have been different. It's no one is inherently more evil or like greedy than another group of people. It's just the nature of humanity, unfortunately, that it's, I realize that I can, so I will.
Yeah. That's a very interesting take. And I think, no, I can see that. I want to, can you share some of the uncomfortable findings that you discovered during your research?
I personally have been working on an article about the history of barbecue for about 2 years now. And something that people do not tell you, and they will not tell you today, is that when they would hang Black people from trees, they would gather the community with barbecue. And this became a cornerstone of killings. You know, they would slaughter a hog, they would hang a Black person in a tree. And there's a real correlation there. It's never talked about. And maybe it's not my place to talk about. I don't know. But this is one of those uncomfortable things where, like, I started writing that article because I roasted a pig and I learned how to do it from my ancestors. But when I realized that those ancestors were gathering to string up Black people, I stopped writing because I didn't know where to go. Yeah. And I still don't.
How would you feel comfortable? Like, would you invite someone who has experienced the suffering to collaborate with you? Or, okay, so I think that's how you would feel more.
To tell you a really funny story. Yeah. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's bizarre. Do you believe in spirits and ghosts and things like that?
I actually have a mathematical theory about it. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. I'd love to talk to you about it sometime.
That sounds awesome.
I woke up. So like I said, I've been digging into this history of barbecue, the honest history of barbecue for about 2 years now. I woke up at 4:30 one morning, which is not uncommon for me. But for some reason, I felt compelled to message a girl I went to high school with. Really weird because, it's been 20 years since I've been in high school. I hadn't talked to this girl at all. But, and this sounds bad, but it's true. She is an educated Black woman. And I was like, if anybody's going to know about Reconstruction, this woman is going to know. And I felt bad reaching out to her because that's really stereotypical for me to be like, you're Black and you're smart and you should know about this, And I said, I've been reading this story. And she said, well, send me a copy of the story. And I sent her a copy of the story, which happened to be about a Black family by the name of Croom in Eastern North Carolina. This intelligent, capable Black woman that I reached out to randomly is married to a Black Croom from Eastern North Carolina, whose family is exactly the family that this article is about. And it's making the hair on my arm stand up. I haven't figured out how to connect the pieces yet, to make it happen, but I am digging and I am sorting and I'm tiptoeing at the same time because her wife's experience, her wife's family's experience.
That's an incredible coincidence.
Yeah.
It's stunning, right? And so I'm so thrilled to have access to these wonderful humans that they do want to help tell the story with me. But I've got to have a really good understanding before I even sit down at a table with them and try to talk to them because I don't want to get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the conversations just happen naturally, just as you found the right person. Mm-hmm. I think when you sit down with someone and your intentions are good, where you know where you're coming from and you don't have the intention of hurting and totally the opposite, I think things happen naturally.
You were saying something about Mexico and wanting an apology from Spain and the dichotomy of Spain way back in the day does have things to apologize for, but it's also the worst thing that ever happened to you. It doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna suffer forever. Because 2 years ago I went to, for the first time, see the island where my great-grandparents came from in Greece. Chios. So it's about 5 miles off the coast of Turkey. And Chios is, it's famous for a few things, but one of them is 200 years ago, there was a huge massacre on the island. It was kind of a bit like Ukraine today, of it really caught the imagination of the American public of this a democratic revolution against a larger empire that's trying to break free type of thing. So Greece was trying to break free from the Ottomans, and there was a lot of American solidarity for the time. There's a lot of artwork, it was very well publicized, this big massacre that happened on this one island that I'm from. So
is that when your ancestors left Greece?
No, they were there for another 100 years.
So they survived the massacre.
Yes, and they
that's something that they maybe didn't It's so tough to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Did they document that, or did they just try to put it behind them?
So my grandmother's first cousin is she still lives there, and she was talking about how in the village it was kind of like a complete societal collapse from this, of people didn't remember what their last names were, and they just forgot everything because like just society's collapsed and they had to completely rebuild and things like that. And so then I was asking a cousin of mine as we were driving around, because they are 5 miles off the coast of Turkey, and a lot of Turkish tourists like on the weekend come just to like hang out. And so things are in Turkish, menus and things like that, and people know Turkish and things like that. And I'm like, is that awkward? Like the Turkish people coming, because like that was not that long
Like,
ago.
hey, we massacred you. How many years ago?
It was 1821, 1822,
Okay,
so 100 years ago, or 200 years ago.
200 years ago, they massacred them, and now they return for vacation.
Yeah.
Yes, that is uncomfortable, definitely.
So yeah, I asked him, is it uncomfortable, and he said, actually, no. He's like, it happened, but it's like we don't make a secret that it happened. Just, it did, and we moved on, and like we didn't try to hide it.
Is it called economics?
It's yeah. I mean, they have it on like they don't try to hide it. They like they had a special 200-year exhibit when we were there and things like that. The Turkish people like who come, like they acknowledge that it happened, and they're like, it's out in the open, so why would it be awkward?
But also the Ottoman Empire was like the most successful empire, the longest standing empire in history, wasn't it? I'm sorry, we're gonna have to check cite my source on that, but it lasted till
like World War One.
Yeah, and so like if everybody who had been conquered by the Ottoman Empire held a grudge, we wouldn't be getting anywhere.
Actually, that's an interesting thing because so there is. Again, so the massacre that happened on my island, very well documented. There's a famous painting of it. It was all over the American newspapers, and there was a lot of solidarity in America for Greek independence. Versus in 1915 in Armenia, there was the Armenian genocide. And Turkey won't even acknowledge to this day that it happened. It's a sticking point in the UN, actually, that they won't acknowledge that it happened. And so there is tension and there is awkwardness there because they won't like acknowledge it, versus a similar thing happened in Chios, but there is no awkwardness because it's
Is it a cultural?
It was acknowledged.
But is it a cultural thing where like Greeks were more? And of course, it's situational too. They're literally an island. They really need people to come there and spend money, and so like they would be more. They call it fawning. They would be more like, okay, like that's cool, than a country that can stand on its own. That
Actually, well, no. Armenia and Turkey are pretty, in terms of territory and international relations, there's a lot of like tied together. So it's, and so
it would be really beautiful.
Nagorno-Karabakh, which is that fought over land, which is kind of a bit of an area of proxy war in recent years and stuff like that. It all spills over from the history of, if you just acknowledged what happened, we can begin to heal and move past.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so real. Yes.
That's very interesting. So Well, the thing I always thought is, I I have a podcast in Spanish where we talk about geopolitics, and we are always saying that, like, just think about where the resources are. That's where you're going to have most of the wars, most of the conflicts, most of the tension. Um, and it has been historical. It's not something new. Like, if you really dig down, like, it's going to come from a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly.
People have always been fighting for power.
Yeah.
The location, because that's resources. Geopolitics, it's fascinating because of that. And something that you said that was very interesting about economics. I was actually listening to a guy who's a movie producer, and he's a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. And he's like, like, today I feel very disappointed on humanity, and I'm sure like Stanley Kubrick will feel the same, because he envisioned a society where we would go to Mars, driven by human expansion, driven by, if you want, by consciousness expansion. We want humanity to get there. But it seems that the real motive behind it's economic. The real.
I feel like it's like our evacuation plan. Like, when everything falls apart here, we're just going to colonize Mars.
I feel that's potentially the option. Some people speculate that it may be resources extraction too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Oh,
of course.
very much.
There's no point in doing anything if you can't extract resources. My heavens.
Yeah, but we will see. But I think this is the very important piece of all history, because if humanity was to reset everything and go to a different planet and start from scratch, it's going to be very important, critical to understand what were the problems here.
And how can we make them better? And the thing is, part of it is...
That's a wonderful way to look at it.
Part of it is, I've been sitting here this whole time and it's like, you should learn lessons from history, but part of it is human nature is not going to change that much unless every single person is like, I'm actively working on myself so that none of these what Freud called the something of small differences. He had a theory where it's people who are essentially the same in every single way, except for like a little difference that will become the sticking point of like, we can never get along. We have this tiny difference.
If people could just stop being assholes, we'd all be okay.
Yeah.
How do we get that message out?
So it's like, a large part of it is learning from these events in the past where people were assholes and it got out of control. But also it's like, going forward, that underlying behavior, you should work on it. So I mean...
It would be really neat. Are they going to implement like a special task force to analyze societal deficits and be like, when we go to Mars, like they're going to have like a training manual. They're like, this is how you respond to this, and then maybe that's how they'll do it.
I think it's going to be kind of what we've seen. I don't think anything is going to change, because what I find very interesting about fears of power is that, for me, if someone is already looking for power, there's already something wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how our society is ruled. You know? I may be very idealistic, but I would feel more comfortable. For me, the ideal world will be where a wise person is actually in charge of making some of those decisions or giving advice or guidance. But the very fact that people who are supposed to be our leaders, they do it because they want power, I think that's already...
Yeah, the people who should have power are the ones who don't want it, is always the maxim.
That's why I always like Bernie Sanders. He's adorable. He's just precious. But, I mean, Is he intimidating? Is he like a bold leader? What if people want something that we don't. And, we're different. We're all different. And it's all based on the experiences that we had because of our economic background, our racial background, our educational experience. And everybody's interpretation of the world is different.
Yeah.
And, it's like the people that paint their chests and scream at football games. That guy is not someone that I am. And I will never be that guy. But that guy's okay. There's nothing wrong with him. But how did we get to be so very different?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a lot of, it just boils down to us as individuals and how we feel about ourselves and what we think we need to feel better about ourselves, and then we act accordingly, and then those actions combined with other people's actions add up, and that is history.
So Zen, maybe this is what we will do with what our generation will do, or at least maybe our children will do this, right? We get better every generation. We really do.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think every generation has a unique potential, and our job as adults is actually help them develop the best version they can become. The thing there is like, do we really have the best example? Are we the best example for that?
we have to be honest with them.
Yeah.
I'm in a mom's group actually that is talking about how to raise socially responsible, emotionally healthy children. Like, this is the focus, because children spend so much time looking at screens that like actual human interaction can be really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me personally, a very important part of history is art. I feel that is, for me, I think I learned more about history when I was exploring art, because I think it's a very human way to capture the essence of an era or the circumstances that the artist is observing. It's not that conventional, but I think can be a very powerful tool. I personally do it through music. I love music, and I just love paying attention to the lyrics, the rhythm, the music, the sounds they are using. And that tells you a full story of everything. Sadly, there's a lot of reggaeton nowadays in our society, which is good for a party.
You don't like Bad Bunny?
I have a thing with people who can't pronounce the letter R as we do, like R. Yeah. And I mean, I think he has great producers. But music industry has evolved in a very interesting way. Yesterday, I was listening to the Carmina Burana, this piece from Karl Orff, and I think it's written in Old German. And I was like, how did we move from writing a full concert to then recording in the studios a full album, like back in the 80s, even on the 90s. And then now the music industry is just focused on releasing singles.
Yeah.
Is it
it's all about the technology. Actually, this is something that fascinates me is rag. Do you know rag?
Mm-hmm.
So rag is sort of, it's coming about in like a 1910s music hall era of, it is going from the people who are going to these like public concerts, or they
talking about ragtime.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Who are going to see like full symphonies and things like that, and how are they like simplifying it for like players at like at clubs or like billiard halls and things like that. So it's like, so that there is musical entertainment, kind of like a formal symphony, but like the convenient, short, easy version, sort of. And like that's rag, and then that becomes jazz, and then things are, yeah, as technology and circumstances evolve, the music has always evolved to like fit it.
Yeah. And I have mixed feelings about that because oversimplifying things may not be the best way. I think it's good for, I mean, life nowadays is going by so quickly. And I understand why people, like, the spam attention has reduced. But I feel that it's important to go back to the basics, right? Even if you are practicing anything, like I was a drummer, and one of my favorite manuals was called Back to Basics. Just like practicing your tempo, like practicing the basic stuff. And right now we are exploring gardening, going back to the basics, like producing our own food. I feel when people have an activity, a hobby that is like that primal in that way, I think that really has a very powerful and positive effect in ourselves.
It's the simplifying things and for ease of comfort and things like that. And we think that we're like making these huge advances, and then we figure out, oh no, that's actually was a step backwards. Like doing things like maybe taking more time and more effort seems like old-fashioned and out of date, but it was actually, there was a reason we did it that way. Like especially with food of like the 50s and the 60s, microwave dinners and things like that, of like we made things instant, we made things have really long shelf life, so we can, it doesn't have to even be in season, and we can ship it across the country or from other countries and things like that, and we can have anything we want at any time we want. And obviously that you sacrifice quality of food and health doing all those things in the sake of convenience. So it's definitely, to a point, advances in technology and convenience, there's a point where it stops actually being so convenient to our overall.
Yeah, because driving to cancer treatment twice a month is not convenient. Not.
That's true.
And these foods are not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
These ultra processed foods, they're not doing good things to our bodies. And that's apparent. Are you guys familiar with the slow food movement?
No.
Somewhat, yeah.
So Alice Waters, a legendary chef and gardener. If you're into gardening, definitely get into Alice Waters. She was a real visionary. And she said, let's just slow down a minute. Let's raise the animals with care. Let's cultivate the vegetables with care. Let's pick varieties that are special and that taste a special way, because a carrot is not a carrot as a carrot. There's all kinds of carrots, and the soil that you grow it in is relevant. Mm-hmm. The conditions, the whatever, every bit of it matters. And as a chef, I went to culinary school and I worked in kitchens for 20 years.
Wow.
And food is something that I'm really passionate about, but I don't even realize it because it's just a factor in my day. I'm going to spend time cooking. I'm going to spend a lot of time cooking. And I have the ability to do that, whereas most people don't. Most people are just trying to get as much food at as little cost as quickly as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't blame them for that because that's probably how they were raised. Mm-hmm. That's probably all they have time for.
It's since the world wars and the whole idea of like powdered eggs,
convenience, living,
and like we figured out a way to get them cheese that won't go bad on the journey over. And it's like, why don't we just use that for everyone now? And it's like, oh, hey, this is like, we are evolved humans. So, yeah.
So yeah, the slow food movement is just slowing down and really looking at what you're eating and what makes what you're eating special and what makes it good for you and what makes it enjoyable.
I understand how people are going crazy. I mean, I see the benefits of making life convenient because we also need some people to spend time innovating and finding new things, right? So the premise here is like, I want more time to do what I enjoy, which is valid. And I think people should go for it. But at the same time, I think we need to really pay attention to the basic points that are critical for our own health. Now, food is one of those for sure. And I grew up in again, Mexico, living on a budget. And
on a what? I'm sorry.
On a budget. So like we used to find like that means that you just find the cheapest things you can.
Oh, a budget. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I couldn't understand a budget. Okay.
And so like it's hard. It was hard for me to transition from, okay, I gotta save money to, like it's gonna be expensive, but it's my health. And I don't think I had that vision when I lived in Mexico because I don't think health is that big of a priority.
Health comes below survival.
Yeah, exactly. This has been like really, really good. I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything that you want to highlight? Any book? Yeah. Why don't you recommend a book? What's your favorite book?
My favorite book. Ooh. About history or just of all time? Or
one for history and
fiction
one general.
Or nonfiction? Okay. For history, I might say I like it's called The Immortality Key. As a classicist, I studied ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and I don't work in it now, but like this guy who wrote this book is he's a lawyer, but he was a classics major, so I feel like very similar life position of like, oh, I loved the subject matter and I always had a question when I was in college, and I just decided to go and like research it, and he wrote this whole book, and it's fascinating. It's about the Eleusinian mysteries and the pagan continuity hypothesis, and the Eucharist, and it's like a real life Dan Brown novel, like the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. Yeah. It's fascinating. So history book that I read that recently, and I love that. Yeah.
Nice. How about you?
So I love books. I am thoroughly a writer and thoroughly a reader. And I have been carrying 3 books in my bag with me for a little while now. The first one I actually have with me right now.
Nice.
Because I got it from the library 3 times, and then I was like, I just need to buy my own copy. And when I bought the copy, it came in and it looks different than the one that I had been getting from the library. So it's obviously special. That's not Han, you are here. And it's all about enlightenment. It's all about looking at life and appreciating the small moments. And I, as a cancer survivor, I realized that, sorry, that's not something we talked about, but for me, my reading has really gravitated towards growth, like spiritual growth. how do I become a better person every day? How do I learn more every day? And how do I be more, how do I teach my children better every day? And this book has really allowed me to do that. Like, I mean, it's allowed me to take breaks and just read little bits of information to help keep me on the right path, to keep me focused on the positivity, and to keep me focused on appreciating.
That's really, I think I've heard that before, but I really have to read it. And yeah, I just have like so many things to read that sometimes I'm at the library and I'm like,
I can't go in bookstores anymore because I'll get them.
I've got, like I said, this is another really good one. Developing a Buddha brain, one simple practice at a time. Rick Hansen, have you ever heard his podcast?
No.
He and his son have a podcast. His son's name is Forrest, and I love listening to it because, you know, to have been raised by the guy that wrote this book. He's a neuropsychologist, okay?
Oh, wow.
He's constantly talking about how science and emotions, you know, like everything is intertwined. How like your brain is literally responding to the stimuli the way we know your brain is going to respond to the stimuli. How are you internalizing that?
Yeah.
You know, and you can change that. You can change how you interpret things, how you experience things, just by like making simple changes. And there you go. That's another book that I really like.
And the third one?
Oh, you got a third one? Oh, I have a third one, but this one's really far out. And that's why I didn't take it out. But I want to publicize this one the most because I love this woman with all my heart. And a big reason, she's just an amazing human. And so the 5 Tibetan yoga workshop, tone your body and transform your life. This woman is a Reiki master, and she studied in Scotland, and she has meditated in these labyrinths and studied with these incredible people and has absorbed all of it in a very approachable way. Partly because I've known her for 25 years. So like, I know who she used to be. She used to be like really intense and like in such a rush that she'd have 2 different shoes on and not even realize it. And then like her whole life changed. And she again had to start really looking for the good and like holding on to it. And there's not enough I can share about this. But anyways, it's Dr. Susan Westbrook, the 5 Tibetan yoga workshop.
You know what's very interesting that I talked to you about the history topic, but actually this project is about kind of combining these books that you're bringing.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all, like, I'm just thinking now and I'm like, that's like such a perfect, like, if you want to understand history, like understanding like neuropsychology and stuff is like, maybe honestly start there and just like understand how people react to things in their lives. And then you'll understand, well, like history is just a bunch of people reacting.
We've got the science now. Like they can literally scan your brain and be like, oh, this is what you're feeling. And this is the stimulus that created that.
Exactly. Our approach, I have a background I've been in the financial sector for a long time, my entire career. And my friend, he's a neurobiologist. So we are combining those and we are developing, I mean, we already worked on that, is how we make financial decisions. And everything is like how we feel, you know, and that thing of how you can change, how our behavior can change. And that's possible. It's just like how we make it possible, you know, how we make it happen.
Really expand your mind. You really have to open your mind, and this sounds cheesy, but open your heart to learning about yourself and being honest about your own habits and your biases. oh, biases are a dirty, dirty thing.
Yeah.
And when we like to pretend we don't have them, but when we really slow down and we look, our opinions are skewed.
Yeah, and like not necessarily being like, it's like that's okay. Everyone has them. It's like you don't have to like just acknowledge it and like give yourself a little bit of grace. Be kind and just be like, okay, I'm gonna do better going forward. I acknowledge that there was some of that in the decision making process, and now I know how to pivot. So yeah, and that goes back to the like acknowledging all the uncomfortable topics of like, yes, they're uncomfortable, but we're not like saying you're a bad person or these people were necessarily like bad people, because we're like acknowledging that like their psychology made them do like discriminatory things. It's just like, oh, that's something to be mindful of and like pivot going forward.
Yep, absolutely. Any closing remarks that you want to share?
I would just say thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. It was really fascinating. I think we I just really loved talking about the psycho, why we do what we do. That's all of what history is and what we write about and talk about and love, basically. Yeah.
And so yes, everybody can find me on Substack, Anna Kathryn Creech. Please like, subscribe, comment. I haven't published anything in a little while, but I do have 3 really solid pieces out there. Also, I have countless newspaper articles that are available if you just Google my name. And yeah, that's all. And
I'm Anne Grace Evans on Substack, and I'm currently I'm about to relaunch it with a new look, sort of. But yes, I write every week. And also we're working on some other things, I think, together and separately. And so Substack is, I think, where
that's where people can find us.
Yeah. Try to put those things out in the future. Yeah.
It's going to be very exciting. When you told me about the project, it sounded like amazing to me. So I really
thank you.
I'm so glad you think so.
Yeah.
I think it is. And I think that you are the right people to bring this topic to the public.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being here. I think
thank you for having us.
Great. I would personally love to have you back in the future to tell us about what you've done in your project and any other new nasty discoveries that you've made on history. And I can't really thank you enough. It was a really
thank you so
great
much.
Conversation. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.